The revelation. The immense amphitheater of the Galactic War Academy fell silent as Professor Xilric glided to the center of the stage. His translucent body, a shimmering collection of bioluminescent organs suspended in a gelatinous form, pulsed with an unusual intensity today. The students, representing over 40 species from across the coalition, sensed something different about their instructor's demeanor. Today, Professor Xilric began, his voice resonating through both the air and the subtle telepathic field he projected. We discussed the most controversial topic in our curriculum: why humans are banned from participating in galactic warfare. A ripple of excitement passed through the gathered students. Many shifted in their seats, adjusting appendages and sensory organs to better focus on the professor. Some species, like the insectoid kazir, clicked their mandibles in anticipation, while others, such as the crystalline voxti, hummed at frequencies that expressed their intrigue. "I see I have your attention," Xilric continued, his body flaring briefly with amber light. "What you learned today contradicts what most of you believe. Humans aren't banned because they are weak or primitive. They are banned because they are too dangerous." A Dralthi student raised one of her 4 arms, her scaled skin reflecting the Academy's ambient light. "Professor, with respect, humans have no natural armor, no claws, and their sensory organs are limited. Even their gravity well is modest. How could they possibly be dangerous to species like the Croton?" She gestured toward a massive, armored classmate whose species was known for their invulnerability. "An excellent starting point, Kezra," Xilric replied, "and the exact misconception I wish to correct." With a fluid motion, he activated the holographic system that dominated the center of the room. An image appeared, a human male, standing alone on a battlefield. He wore what appeared to be primitive armor by coalition standards, carried a simple projectile weapon, and looked utterly unremarkable. Blood, both his own and that of other species, covered his form. "This is Commander James Chen, Earth Defense Force." The image was taken during the Rigel Uprising, before the ban. Xilric's voice grew solemn. One standard day before this image, Commander Chen's unit of 20 humans was surrounded by 800 Vraxian elite warriors. Another student, a methane-breathing Golgoth, expelled bubbles of disbelief through his respiratory vents. "Impossible. Vraxians are apex predators. Their combat reflexes are 3 times faster than most species." "Indeed," Xilric confirmed. And yet, when coalition peacekeepers arrived, they found 793 dead Vraxians. Of the 20 humans, 17 survived. Stunned silence gripped the classroom. "But how?" asked a serpentine Sithari student, coiling her body tighter in confusion. Xilric expanded his form slightly, a physical manifestation of the gravity of his words. "That is what we are here to understand. The Coalition didn't ban humans because they couldn't fight. They banned them because of how they fight." The hologram changed to show tactical recordings. The small human unit, seemingly trapped, had converted their disadvantage into a brutal killing field. They hadn't tried to break out. They had drawn their enemies in, using the terrain, improvised traps, and coordinated tactics that seemed to evolve minute by minute. "Humans call this asymmetric warfare," Xilric explained. "When outmatched, they don't surrender or fight honorably until death as most coalition species would. They change the very nature of the battle." The hologram showed humans using the bodies of fallen enemies as cover, setting environmental traps, feigning injuries to lure attackers, and fighting with a savagery that made even the hardened Croton student flinch. "But that's dishonorable," whispered a luminary student, her bioluminescent patterns displaying visible distress. "By whose standards?" Xilric challenged. "Not by human standards. Humans developed warfare in isolation, without the galactic combat protocols that have governed coalition conflicts for millennia. They never internalized our concepts of battlefield honor." He floated closer to the students, his form pulsing with intense blue light. "Humans have a saying, 'All's fair in love and war.' To them, survival outweighs honor. Efficiency trumps tradition. The next series of holograms showed human conflicts throughout their history. Medieval armies poisoning wells, guerrilla fighters blending with civilian populations, modern soldiers fighting house to house in urban centers, special forces operators conducting night raids. Each example demonstrated humans turning disadvantages into advantages, breaking conventional rules, and achieving victory through adaptation rather than might. Notice, Silric prompted, how humans weaponize everything: terrain, psychology, even their own limitations. When Vraxian commanders surrounded those 20 humans, they expected submission or a doomed final stand. They could not conceive that the surrounded humans would see the situation as an opportunity. A multi-eyed Zethri student blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought. An opportunity for what, Professor? To have all their enemies in one place, Silric answered simply. The class collectively shuddered. Zilric's form contracted slightly as he continued. Humans evolved as persistence predators on a death world. Their planet hosts more apex predators than any other known life-bearing world in the Coalition. They competed with these predators not by developing stronger natural weapons, but by outthinking them. The hologram shifted to Earth's prehistoric times, showing early humans hunting creatures many times their size through endurance, cooperation, and tool use. While most species evolved to fight in specific ways, humans evolved to adapt how they fight. This is why conventional military assessments fail to accurately gauge human combat potential. We measured their physical attributes, not their adaptability. A Vulcrian student, whose species prided themselves on their strategic thinking, raised a question. But Professor, surely after the first few encounters, Coalition forces would have adapted to human tactics. Silric's color shifted to a deep purple, indicating grim amusement. That is precisely what makes humans so dangerous. They never use the same tactics twice against an opponent who has seen them before. They learn faster than any species we've encountered. He brought up a new set of images. Coalition military reports spanning several decades of limited human involvement in galactic affairs. Review these assessments, he instructed. Notice how human fighting methods changed with each engagement. When we adapted to their guerrilla tactics, they switched to overwhelming force. When we prepared for direct assault, they infiltrated our command structures. When we hardened our communications, they waged psychological warfare. The Croton student, whose species rarely spoke in class, rumbled a question that vibrated through the floor. Why not simply overpower them? Numbers would prevail eventually. An understandable assumption, Silric acknowledged, and one that cost many Coalition commanders their lives. Humans have a unique response to being outmatched that most species lack. They call it spite. New footage appeared, showing the Battle of Proxima Station. A single damaged human vessel, surrounded by a Dreth battle fleet, flew directly into the enemy flagship rather than surrender. The human captain knew he couldn't win, Silric explained, but he could ensure the enemy commander didn't either. Such behavior was previously unknown in galactic warfare. The psychological impact on Dreth forces was devastating. They retreated from 3 systems afterward, fearing similar human responses. The Serpentine student uncoiled slightly. This seems irrational. By non-human standards, yes. Silric agreed. This irrationality is precisely what makes humans unpredictable. Game theory fails when one participant doesn't play by recognizable rules. For the next hour, Silric detailed case after case of human military actions that defied conventional tactics. The students watched with growing unease as the pattern became clear. Humans didn't just fight differently. They thought differently about fighting itself. Before we end today's session, Silric said, his form now pulsing slowly with deep red light, I want you to understand something fundamental about humans. Unlike every other Coalition species, humans evolved without any natural weapons. No claws, no armor, no venom. Their only evolutionary advantage was their minds. He paused, floating higher so all could see him clearly. Imagine a species whose only tool for survival was intelligence. Then imagine that species spending its entire history using that intelligence to defeat stronger, faster predators. Finally, imagine what happens when that species develops technology. The final hologram appeared, showing the aftermath of a human conflict on a non-coalition world. The devastation was complete, with strange patterns of destruction that made no immediate tactical sense. This is what remains of the Selvan Imperial fleet, once thought invincible. They attacked a human mining colony, expecting easy conquest. The humans destroyed not just the attacking force, but the Empire's entire military capability in under 3 days. To this day, we don't fully understand how. The professor's form diminished slightly, a sign he was reaching the conclusion of the lesson. That is enough for today. Tomorrow, we will examine the classified records of the Helios incident, which led directly to the ban on human participation in galactic warfare. Prepare yourselves. What you've seen today is merely the prelude. As the students filed out, their usual post-lecture chatter was absent. Even species that normally competed with each other moved together in stunned silence. The crystalline Vox T student lingered behind, approaching Professor Xilric with careful steps. "Professor," the crystal being's resonant voice vibrated, "these humans, if they're so dangerous, why does the Coalition allow them any interstellar presence at all?" Xilric's form shifted to a deep blue. "An excellent question. One we will address tomorrow. But consider this. Sometimes it's safer to know exactly where a predator is than to lose track of it entirely." The Vox T departed, leaving Xilric alone in the vast amphitheater. He dimmed his bioluminescence to a soft glow and accessed his private files on a secured terminal. The footage for tomorrow's class was heavily redacted, even for him. The true reason for the ban went far beyond what he had shared today. He wondered if his students were ready for the truth. Few in the galaxy were. The documentation. The following day, students arrived at the lecture hall to find the entrance guarded by Coalition security officers, sleek, armored figures with the characteristic green insignia of the Galactic Archives Division. Each student underwent a thorough identity verification before being permitted entry. Even their personal data devices were temporarily deactivated and stored outside. Inside, the amphitheater had been reconfigured. The usual open seating arrangement had been replaced with isolated viewing stations, each equipped with privacy fields. Professor Xilric waited at the center, his translucent form pulsing with a solemn indigo hue. "Today's material is classified level Omega," he announced once all were seated. "What you are about to see has been restricted to fewer than 200 individuals across the entire Coalition. The security measures are not theatrical. They are necessary." The Croton student growled softly, the sound reverberating through his massive chest. "Is any species truly dangerous enough to warrant such precautions?" "Judge for yourself," Xilric replied, activating the central holographic system. The air shimmered, and the students found themselves seemingly transported to another place, a Coalition military observation post orbiting a dusty red planet. "This is unaltered surveillance footage from the Helios incident," Xilric explained. 17 standard years ago, before any of you were Academy cadets. The timestamp confirms its authenticity. The footage showed a Coalition peacekeeping fleet in orbit around the planet. Below on the surface, a civil war raged between two factions of the native Araxians, 6-limbed beings with remarkable technological prowess, but a fractious social structure. The Coalition Council had authorized limited intervention to prevent genocide. Xilric continued. Standard peacekeeping protocols were in effect: orbital containment, weapons interdiction, humanitarian corridors. The students watched as the carefully orchestrated peacekeeping operation proceeded according to textbook Coalition doctrine. Then, unexpectedly, 3 human vessels appeared at the system's edge. These ships were not authorized to enter the conflict zone, Xilric noted. They were scientific vessels that had been mapping nearby systems. When they detected the scale of the violence, they diverted to offer humanitarian assistance. The Dralthi student, Kezra, leaned forward. That seems honorable enough. Why would this lead to a ban? Watch, Silric said simply. The footage continued. The coalition commander, a respected Tholian admiral, ordered the human vessels to withdraw. The humans responded with a request to evacuate civilians from a particularly dangerous hotspot. When denied, they acknowledged the order and appeared to begin departure procedures. 6 hours later, coalition sensors detected anomalies on the planet's surface. Magnify Sector 12G. The recorded voice of the Tholian admiral commanded. The surveillance footage zoomed in on a settlement under heavy bombardment. As the students watched, small groups of figures moved through the chaos with startling efficiency, gathering civilians and guiding them to safety. The figures wore environmental suits that obscured their species, but their movement patterns were unmistakable. Humans, whispered the Serpentine Sithari student. Indeed, confirmed Silric. While appearing to comply with withdrawal orders, they had covertly deployed teams to the surface. 38 humans infiltrated a war zone that coalition forces had deemed too dangerous for intervention. The footage continued, showing the human teams establishing safe corridors through active combat zones, utilizing tactics that seemed improvised yet strangely effective. They didn't engage directly in the fighting but created protected spaces that neither Araxian faction could penetrate. How? Asked the Vox T student, crystal structure vibrating in confusion. The Araxians had energy weapons and atmospheric control technology. Silric's form rippled with dark purple. The humans exploited a weakness no one else had noticed. The Araxian weapon systems used a specific targeting algorithm based on their own neurological patterns. Human nervous systems register differently, creating a minimal sensor profile. They couldn't have known that in advance, objected the methane-breathing Golgoth. Precisely, Silric agreed. They discovered it through observation and adapted within hours. Watch what happens next. The footage advanced to show human teams establishing unusual devices at key locations throughout the conflict zone. The devices emitted fields that confused Araxian targeting systems, creating large blind spots in the battlefield. They effectively rewrote the rules of the conflict. Silric explained. Neither Araxian faction could accurately target within these zones, creating de facto neutral territories. The luminary students' bioluminescent patterns brightened with comprehension. They found a way to create peace without firing a single shot. A temporary peace, Silric corrected. But yes, an innovation no coalition strategist had considered. Our protocols focused on separating the combatants. The humans instead changed the nature of the space between them. The footage continued, showing the conflict's intensity diminishing as the human intervention expanded. Within 3 days, casualty rates had dropped by 78%. Within 7 days, preliminary peace talks had begun in one of the human-established neutral zones. This seems like a success, the Zethri student observed, all eyes blinking in sequence. Why would this incident lead to a ban? Silric's form darkened. Because of what happened when one faction violated the neutral zone. The hologram shifted to a new scene. One Araxian faction had brought a concealed weapon into the peace talks, a device designed to bypass the human countermeasures. When activated, it killed 27 Araxians instantly, and 3 humans. What happened next caused several students to recoil. The surviving humans' response was immediate and terrifying. Their tactics shifted from defensive to offensive with no transition. Using the very environment as a weapon, they systematically dismantled the attacking faction's entire command structure in less than 4 hours. Notice, Silric said quietly, how they switched from protectors to eliminators with no hesitation. The coalition forces were still processing the attack while the humans had already ended the conflict. A hologram showed the aftermath. The faction that had violated the peace was not just defeated but completely neutralized as a fighting force. Their leadership was incapacitated, their weapons disabled, their communications severed. And it had all been accomplished by fewer than 30 humans using minimal technology. The Coalition Security Council reviewed this footage for 60 days. Silric continued. They reached a disturbing conclusion. Humans possess an innate understanding of warfare that other species lack. When peaceful, they can create solutions we cannot envision. When provoked, they can execute strategies we cannot counter. He paused, allowing his students to process this information. But there is more, he continued finally. After order was restored, Coalition investigators interviewed the human team leader. Her explanation was perhaps more disturbing than their actions. The hologram shifted to an interrogation room. A human female sat across from 3 Coalition officials. Despite being significantly smaller than her questioners, she displayed no signs of intimidation. "You violated direct orders," the lead investigator stated. "We did," the human acknowledged without hesitation. "You interfered in a conflict beyond your jurisdiction." "Yes." "You deployed unauthorized technology in a restricted zone." "Technically, we didn't bring any weapons," the human corrected. "We repurposed local technology." "Why?" the investigator demanded. The human's expression changed subtly, displaying what the professor identified as determination. "Because you were following protocols, and people were dying." "Protocols don't save lives. Adaptation does." The Croton student rumbled thoughtfully. "She shows no remorse for disobedience." "Humans have a concept called moral imperative," Silric explained. "They believe certain actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of laws or orders. This creates a dangerous unpredictability in military scenarios." The interrogation continued, with the human explaining that her team had run survival calculations and determined that coalition peacekeeping methods would result in approximately 130,000 additional casualties before resolution. "So you took it upon yourselves to intervene?" the investigator asked. "Wouldn't you?" the human countered. "If you could save 100,000 lives by breaking a rule, isn't that the obvious choice?" The recording ended, and Professor Silric allowed a moment of silence before continuing. The human team was eventually exonerated due to the outcome. They had, after all, saved countless lives and ended a planetary civil war. But the Security Council recognized a fundamental problem. Humans cannot be reliably integrated into coalition military operations because they will always prioritize what they perceive as the right action over established protocols. The Vox-T students' crystalline form caught the light as they shifted position. "But Professor, their actions were effective. Perhaps our protocols are flawed." "An insightful observation," Silric acknowledged, "and one that caused significant debate within the Council. But consider the broader implications. Coalition military doctrine was developed over millennia to ensure predictable, controllable conflict resolution across thousands of different species and cultures. Introducing an element that can, and will, disregard those protocols threatens the entire system." The serpentine student uncoiled slightly. "You speak as if you've had personal experience with human military thinking, Professor." Silric's bioluminescence flickered briefly, a sign of emotional response that he rarely displayed in class. "I have," he admitted. "Before becoming an academic, I served as a tactical liaison during the Vermilion Expanse conflict. My unit was attached to a human contingent, one of the last joint operations before the ban." The student's attention intensified. Silric rarely shared personal experiences. "We were tracking a separatist group through an asteroid belt. Coalition doctrine called for systematic sweep patterns, which we began implementing." The human commander disagreed with the approach. Silric's form contracted slightly, as if recalling something uncomfortable. "When our superior insisted on following protocol," the human smiled, a facial expression that can indicate many things, and said they would comply. 6 hours later, they had captured the entire separatist leadership. "How?" several students asked simultaneously. "They ignored our sweep pattern and went directly to where they believed the separatists would hide." When asked how they knew, the commander said, "I asked myself where I would go if I were desperate, outgunned, and knew my enemy's standard tactics. They had effectively simulated the enemy's psychology and outthought them. Zilric expanded his form again, commanding the full attention of the class. That is what makes humans unique among coalition species. While we develop doctrine based on history, technology, and established principles, humans think from the perspective of their adversary. They become the enemy in their minds, which allows them to predict behaviors no algorithm can anticipate. The luminary student's patterns shifted to a questioning configuration. Is that not just good strategy, Professor? It would be. Zilric conceded, if it were merely an intellectual exercise. But for humans, it goes deeper. They don't just model enemy behavior. They intuitively understand the desperation, fear, and determination that drive it. This gives them an advantage that cannot be taught or programmed. He deactivated the holographic system, returning the room to its normal state. The ban on human participation in galactic warfare wasn't implemented because humans are ineffective. It was implemented because they are too effective, in ways we cannot predict or control. And that brings us to tomorrow's final session, where you will learn the true reason humans were forbidden from the Galactic War Academy. As the students filed out, once again passing through the security checkpoints, conversation was muted. Many found themselves reconsidering fundamental assumptions about warfare, strategy, and the nature of their human neighbors in the galaxy. The Croydon student, last to leave, paused before Professor Zilric. Professor, the massive being rumbled, you've shown us that humans are adaptable, unpredictable, and intuitive fighters. But there must be more. No species is banned merely for being effective. Zilric's form dimmed to its most serious hue, a deep, almost black purple. You're right, he acknowledged. What you'll learn tomorrow isn't about human capacity for warfare. It's about what happened the one time we pushed humans too far. The one time we witnessed their full potential unleashed. The Croydon's armored hide rippled, a rare display of apprehension from his species. The Omega Protocol, Zilric whispered, was never meant to be employed. But the humans didn't know that. The truth unveiled. On the third day, the students arrived to find the amphitheater transformed. The room had been reconfigured into a secure briefing chamber. Coalition security personnel were even more numerous than before, and each wore the distinctive black insignia of the Omega Clearance Division, an elite unit tasked with safeguarding the Coalition's most dangerous secrets. Professor Zilric floated at the center of the room, his translucent form almost completely darkened, a state his species exhibited only in moments of extreme gravity or mourning. Beside him stood a figure that caused a collective murmur among the students. Director Thelvek of Coalition Strategic Intelligence, one of the 12 most powerful individuals in galactic governance. The director was a Varlian, tall and imposing with iridescent scales that shifted color with his thoughts. Currently, they displayed a pattern that most species instinctively recognized as a warning. Your professor, Thalvek began without preamble, has requested special dispensation to share classified information as part of your education. I have granted this request against the recommendation of my advisors. His scales flickered to a deep crimson as he surveyed the room. What you learn today does not leave this chamber. The psychic dampeners activated in this room will prevent telepathic species from accessing these memories outside this context. Non-telepathic species will find speech inhibitors have been placed in your neural pathways, preventing verbal discussion of this material. Several students shifted uncomfortably at this revelation, but none protested. The implications were clear. What they were about to learn was deemed too sensitive for ordinary classification. Professor Zilric believes understanding the full truth about humans is essential for future military strategists. Thalvek continued. I am inclined to agree, though I question the timing. Nevertheless, you have been granted provisional Omega clearance for the duration of this session only. With a gesture from the director, the room's lighting dimmed further, and a holographic field of unprecedented clarity materialized around them. Unlike previous projections, this one engaged all senses. Students could feel the ambient temperature, smell the atmosphere, even sensed the subtle gravitational differences of the environment being simulated. The Omega Protocol, Professor Xilric began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued, was established after the Third Consensus War as a theoretical framework for total warfare. It was never intended for implementation, merely as a thought exercise to help coalition strategists identify vulnerabilities in our defense systems. The hologram showed a vast starscape, focusing on a remote sector near the coalition's outer boundary. A massive space station orbited a nondescript planet, a research facility of impressive proportions. 23 years ago, Xilric continued, this facility, Outpost Erebus, was conducting classified research on dimensional barriers. The work was theoretical, aimed at understanding the fundamental structure of our universe. No practical applications were expected for centuries. The director interjected, his scales shifting to a somber blue. The facility was staffed by the coalition's most brilliant scientists, including a contingent of 7 humans who specialized in theoretical physics. They were there under a special dispensation, as their species had shown remarkable insight into quantum mechanics. The hologram zoomed in, showing the daily operations of the station, a peaceful research environment where diverse species worked in apparent harmony. On the 427th day of operation, Xilric continued, long-range sensors detected an anomaly approaching the sector. Initial analysis suggested a natural phenomenon, perhaps a rogue black hole or a quantum filament. It was soon clear this assessment was incorrect. The hologram showed the anomaly resolving into a fleet of ships unlike any the students had seen before. Their design was organic, almost predatory, with no clear differentiation between biological and mechanical components. The harvesters, whispered the Vox T student, crystal structure vibrating in recognition. Yes, confirmed Director Thalvek. Though at that time, we had no name for them. They were the first truly extragalactic species we had encountered, not merely from beyond our borders, but from beyond our galaxy entirely. The footage continued, showing the alien fleet approaching the research station. Initial contact attempts followed standard coalition protocols, transmission of peace signals, mathematical sequences designed to establish basic communication, and non-threatening postures. The harvesters' response was immediate and unequivocal. They opened fire without warning, their weapons unlike anything in coalition records. The research station's defensive systems, designed primarily for protection against cosmic radiation and meteoroids, were overwhelmed in seconds. The station's commander sent a distress signal, Xilric explained, but the nearest coalition defense fleet was 17 hours away at maximum speed. The facility's shields would fail within minutes. The Croton student rumbled a question. Why target a research station? What strategic value did it hold? Director Thalvek's scales rippled with grim acknowledgement. None that we could discern. Later analysis suggested the harvesters were drawn to the unique energy signatures of the dimensional research. They seemed to perceive it as either a threat or a resource to be claimed. The hologram focused on the station's command center, where the staff frantically worked to bolster defenses and evacuate non-essential personnel. Among them, the 7 human researchers huddled in intense discussion, separate from the main group. The station commander, a highly decorated Tholian, had received the Coalition Security Council's assessment, Xilric continued. The approaching fleet's technological capabilities exceeded our own by at least 3 development cycles. Conservative projections indicated the research station would be destroyed long before reinforcements arrived. The footage showed the commander gathering his senior staff, including the human contingent leader, a middle-aged female with silver-streaked hair. Dr. Catherine Chen, the director identified, one of Earth's leading theoretical physicists, specializing in quantum barrier technology. The recorded conversation played out before the students. Our options are limited, the Tholian commander stated. The evacuation shuttles cannot outrun their vessels. Defensive systems will fail in approximately 12 minutes. The research data is being purged per coalition protocol. Dr. Chen stepped forward. "Commander, we may have an alternative." "We've explored all defensive options, Doctor," the commander replied. "Not defensive," Chen corrected. "Offensive." The Tholian's crystalline structure shifted in what the students recognized as alarm. "We have no offensive capabilities that would be effective against that fleet." "Not yet," Chen agreed. "But we've been theorizing." She gestured to her human colleagues, who brought forward a complex holographic model. "The dimensional barrier research can be reproposed." The commander studied the model. "This would violate at least 7 coalition ethical protocols on weapons development." "With respect, Commander," Chen responded, "the alternative is the death of everyone on this station. The ethical calculus seems clear." After a moment's hesitation, the commander gave his authorization. What followed was a flurry of activity as the human team, assisted by several non-human colleagues, reconfigured the station's research equipment with startling speed. "What were they doing?" asked the Serpentine Sithari student, coiled tight with tension. "Weaponizing their theoretical research," Silric explained. "In essence, they were attempting to create a localized disruption in the fabric of space-time, a dimensional rift that would affect only the attacking fleet." The luminary student's patterns flashed with alarm. Such technology was millennia beyond coalition science. "In practical application, yes," the director agreed. "But these humans weren't building a stable technology. They were creating a one-time effect that would almost certainly destroy itself in the process." The hologram showed the human team working with incredible focus, reproposing equipment never designed for weapons applications. The station shuddered repeatedly as the harvester weapons gradually overwhelmed its shields. 3 minutes to complete shield failure," announced the station's eye. Dr. Chen looked up from her work, face streaked with sweat. "We need 5. Can you give us 5? The Tholian commander hesitated for only a moment before making a decision. "Divert all power from life support to shields. Emergency oxygen protocols for all personnel." As the station's atmosphere thinned and temperature plummeted, the work continued. The humans, clearly struggling to breathe, refused evacuation to the emergency shelters, working through increasingly harsh conditions. 30 seconds to shield failure, the AI warned. "Ready on my mark," Chen called to her team, fingers flying over holographic controls. The shields failed. The station rocked violently as the first harvester weapons made direct contact. Structural alarms blared throughout the facility. "Now," Chen ordered. What happened next caused several students to recoil instinctively. A beam of energy. Not light, not radiation, but something that the recording struggled to properly display, lanced out from the station toward the harvester fleet. Where it touched the lead vessels, space itself seemed to fold, twist, and invert. The ships didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, along with a spherical section of space around them. The effect cascaded through the fleet with increasing speed. Within seconds, where hundreds of harvester vessels had been, there was now only empty space, a perfect void that seemed darker than the surrounding cosmos. In the command center, the human team slumped to the floor, their improvised equipment sparking and melting around them. The Tholian commander stared at the sensor readings in apparent disbelief. "What did you do?" he finally asked Chen, who was being treated for oxygen deprivation. "Created a localized phase inversion," she gasped. "Pushed them slightly out of alignment with our dimension. Not far enough to access another universe, just between spaces." "Is it permanent?" Chen shook her head weakly. "Mathematical models suggest a temporal effect. They'll realign eventually, years, maybe decades, but they'll be changed by the experience." The hologram froze, and Director Tholvek stepped forward. The Coalition fleet arrived 15 hours later to find the station severely damaged but intact. Of the Harvester fleet, there was no trace. Analysis of sensor data confirmed what Dr. Chen had suggested. The human team had effectively created a dimensional pocket that removed the threat entirely. The Croton students' armored plates shifted uncomfortably. 1 weapon. 7 humans. An entire invasion fleet, gone. Precisely, Cyric confirmed, his form pulsing with solemn light. The human team had accomplished in minutes what our theoretical weapons division had deemed impossible. They had weaponized the very fabric of reality. The luminary students' patterns displayed clear distress. But such technology would violate countless coalition principles. Indeed, the director agreed. And that is precisely why the humans were banned. Not because they were ineffective warriors, but because they demonstrated the capability to develop weapons of mass destruction from purely theoretical concepts, under extreme pressure, with limited resources. Cyric expanded slightly, commanding the students' attention. Consider the implications. 7 civilians, scientists, not warriors, created a weapon that could potentially destabilize the dimensional structure of our galaxy. They did so not out of malice or ambition, but out of necessity in defense of their colleagues. What happened to them? Asked the Vox T student. Director Thulvek's scales shifted to a somber gray. They received the highest commendations the coalition could bestow, and then they were quietly separated from all advanced research projects. Dr. Chen ended her career teaching elementary physics at a university on Earth. But that seems, the Dralthi student, Kezra, began. Unfair, perhaps, Cyric interrupted. But the Security Council faced an unprecedented dilemma. The humans had saved an important research station and potentially provided early warning of the Harvester threat. But they had also demonstrated a capability that frightened even our most seasoned military commanders. The hologram shifted to show the Coalition Security Council in emergency session. The debate was heated, with various factions arguing for different approaches to the human question. The militarists wanted to harness human creativity for weapons development, the director explained. The isolationists wanted humans quarantined in their home system. The pragmatists argued for limited integration with strict oversight. What decided the matter? Asked the Zethri student. The humans themselves. Cyric replied, as the hologram shifted to show a meeting between coalition representatives and a human delegation. The human spokesperson, a dignified elder with dark skin and penetrating eyes, listened as the coalition outlined their concerns about the dimensional weapon. His response stunned the council. We understand your alarm, he said simply. We share it. The technology Dr. Chen's team developed should not exist. If you are asking for assurances that humans won't pursue such research, we cannot give them. Not because we desire such weapons, but because our nature compels us to explore possibilities, especially under threat. He leaned forward, his expression grave. If your concern is that humans might develop devastating weapons when backed into a corner, you are right to be concerned. It is what we do. It is who we are. When faced with extinction, our species does not go quietly. A silence fell over the council chamber. So what do you propose? Asked the council chair. A compromise, the human replied. Exclude us from your wars. Keep us away from your military technologies and strategies. Allow us to contribute to medicine, art, exploration, fields where our creativity serves life rather than destruction. In return, we ask only that you never threaten our existence. For both our sakes. The hologram faded, returning the amphitheater to its normal state. Director Thulvek's scales had shifted to a reflective blue-green, indicating deep contemplation. And so the ban was established, he concluded, not as a punishment, but as a mutual safeguard. Humans recognize their own potential for destruction when threatened, and we recognize the wisdom in never pushing them to that point. Cyric's form brightened slightly. The official curriculum teaches that humans are banned from the Galactic War Academy because their martial capabilities are insufficient. The truth, as you now know, is precisely the opposite. They are banned because their potential exceeds anything we can safely integrate into our military doctrine. The room fell silent as the students processed this revelation. Everything they had believed about humans, their status in the coalition, their role in galactic security, had been fundamentally challenged. There is one final aspect to this story, Director Tholvek said, his scales shifting to an authoritative gold. One that is not in your materials, but which Professor Xilrik convinced me you should know. He gestured, and the door to the amphitheater opened. A figure entered, an elderly human female, her silver hair cut short, her posture still straight despite her advanced years. Several students gasped in recognition. Dr. Catherine Chen, Xilrik confirmed, now retired from her teaching position and serving as a special consultant to the Coalition Science Directorate. Dr. Chen surveyed the room with keen eyes that belied her age. So these are the future strategists of the Coalition, she remarked, her voice carrying easily despite its softness. You've learned about the Erebus incident, I take it. The Croton student, emboldened perhaps by his species' natural confidence, addressed her directly. We have. You created a weapon that violated the laws of physics. Chen smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. No, young one. The laws of physics cannot be violated. They can only be understood more deeply. What we did that day wasn't magic. It was desperation combined with insight. Could you do it again? Asked the serpentine Sithari. Almost certainly not, Chen admitted. The specific conditions, the dimensional research, the station's unique power configuration, even the precise composition of the harvester fleet, created a convergence of factors unlikely to be replicated. She moved to stand beside Professor Xilrik, her small human form a striking contrast to his translucent alien physiology. But that's not why I'm here, she continued. I'm here to tell you something about humans that your professors and politicians might not fully convey. The students leaned forward collectively, even the usually stoic Croton. Humans don't want to fight your wars, Chen said simply. We've had enough of our own. What we did at Erebus wasn't about proving our superiority or demonstrating our value as warriors. It was about protecting lives, human and non-human alike. She gazed around the room, making eye contact with each student in turn. The ban exists for a reason, but perhaps not the reason you think. Yes, humans can be dangerous when threatened, but the greatest danger isn't our capacity for violence. It's our inability to accept limitations. When you tell a human something is impossible, we take it as a challenge. When faced with no-win scenarios, we refuse the premise of the game. Chen smiled again, but this time there was a sadness to it. The Coalition banned us from your wars to protect yourselves, yes, but also to protect us from ourselves, from what we might become if warfare became our primary contribution to galactic society. Director Tholvek's scales rippled with confirmation. Dr. Chen is correct. The ban serves multiple purposes. One often overlooked aspect is that it has channeled human innovation toward fields that benefit all species: medicine, environmental restoration, art, exploration. Since our exclusion from military matters, Chen added, human patents in medical technology have increased 300%. Our contributions to the Coalition Scientific Repository have tripled. Sometimes, limitations foster growth in unexpected directions. The Vox-T students' crystalline form caught the light as they shifted position. Then you approve of the ban, Doctor. I helped design it, Chen revealed, surprising the students. The compromise your council accepted originated with us. We understood better than anyone what could happen if humans were pushed to develop their capacity for warfare to its logical conclusion. Xilrik's form brightened with the closest approximation his species had to a smile. And that, students, is the final lesson. The humans aren't banned from warfare because we fear what they might do to us. They're banned because they fear what they might become. Dr. Chen nodded solemnly. History has shown that human societies oriented toward war tend to become warped by it. We weaponize everything: science, psychology, even art and culture. The ban has allowed humans to focus on what we do best: solving problems, exploring boundaries, connecting seemingly unrelated concepts. She turned to address the Croton directly. Your species evolved natural armor, making you formidable warriors. But imagine if all your society's resources were dedicated to enhancing that single trait. You might become invincible in combat, but at what cost to your art, your philosophy, your capacity for empathy? The Croton rumbled thoughtfully, but offered no counter-argument. Director Tholvek stepped forward once more. This session is concluded. You have been granted insights few in the Coalition possess. Use this knowledge wisely, particularly those of you destined for leadership positions. As the students began to file out, processing everything they had learned, Dr. Chen called out one final thought. Remember this. The most dangerous weapon humans possess isn't our technology or our adaptability. It's our imagination. And like any powerful tool, it serves best when directed toward creation rather than destruction. The amphitheater emptied gradually, leaving only Professor Xilric, Director Tholvek, and Dr. Chen. Do you think they understood the true lesson? Chen asked quietly. Xilric's form pulsed with cautious optimism. Some did. The rest will, in time. Let's hope it's enough, the director replied, his scales shifting to a thoughtful indigo. The harvesters will return eventually. And when they do, despite the ban, despite everything. We'll need the humans, Xilric finished. Chen smiled enigmatically. And we'll be ready, just not in the way anyone expects. As she turned to leave, Director Tholvek couldn't help but wonder if the real reason for the human ban wasn't to protect the Coalition from humans, but to ensure that when truly needed, humanity's capacity for innovation would remain their greatest surprise weapon of all. One that no enemy could possibly anticipate. And if the satisfied gleam in Dr. Chen's eye was any indication, the humans knew it too.